welcome everyone to today's webinar. So it's a collaboration webinar today, probably one of my favourite webinars of the year, which is the collaboration between CHASNZ and Mates in Construction New Zealand. And with the topic today is mind and body on site. So we're really focusing on the latest survey that the Mates team did. What it reveals about the state of wellbeing in construction. Really exciting one. I'm going to introduce Dr. Lauren. Well, I think you're called Doc, aren't you, by your team quite a bit? Yeah. So it's Dr. Lauren Donan, Head of Research and Evaluation for Mates. So she's one of the masterminds behind the survey and did a lot of hard work in getting it out there, and then I know burnt a few midnight hours actually getting the results through as well, so we could enjoy those. So she sits on the senior leadership team at Mates, works across the organisation's theory of change and evaluation frameworks, which is really important. So we have a really high quality and safe program. Works with staff, industry, government and academic partners to translate the evidence into practice. She's an honorary academic at the University of Auckland, PhD in education and social work. And sitting beside here is my friend Slade, so Slade McFarlane. He's the Aura and Engagement Manager for Mates. He's based in Auckland, but I know that he travels a lot. You see him here, you see him there. He loves getting out there and talking to workers in rural communities in Aotearoa. He's been one of the original field officers back in Mates, and I think was one of the original people that started in the organisation. And he's been across thousands of sites in New Zealand. So he's a really good person to actually get, I guess, what's happening on the front line. I'll just give a shout out as well to my colleague, Dr. Stephen Colosi, who I know is listening today but couldn't attend. So Steve did a lot of work on the survey from the CHASNZ side today, but he's globally asked after, and he ended up going up to China, and I think he ended up getting a bug on the way back. And now has a very sore throat, and now just needs to sit back and look after himself and listen to the rest of us speak on his behalf. But thank you, Steve, for the work you did on this. So look, I'll hand over to Slade now. There's a few things we'll just get over in the beginning, but just to remind everyone, look, there's going to be a bit of time for questions at the end. Just use the chat button to do that. We can go through that. And of course, as usual, this webinar and the recording and the slides will be available probably within the next week, and you should get a note about that if you've registered. So over to you, Slade.
Yes, Chris. Oh. Well, I thought I was going to switch over.
I thought so too. One moment, caller.
Oh, yeah. So, welcome everybody. We're just letting you let you know that our 0800 number 111315 is also available to everybody that's here in the industry. Please, if there's anything that mostly we talk about and mostly raise issues for yourself personally, please reach out. We also have the text 1737 and also call 111 in the cases of mostly the scenario makes you a little bit more severe, but definitely get hold of Mates when you can, if possible. What we are talking about are who are Mates, and actually just really looking at the big picture of New Zealand and the construction and why we are here, and the role of the research for the 2025 Wellbeing Survey, what we've heard and the scale of the problem and what workers have said. We've been very privileged to mostly sit on the ground level and actually have a listen to our workers relay back. And even though there's always been a little bit of resistance trying to do a survey, obviously it's always been about privacy more than anything, but really trying to explain the mere fact that, the importance of mostly having their say. The practical steps to take, and obviously with the conjunction with CHASNZ, it's a mix of mental from our point of view and the physical from CHASNZ as well. Here we are, mostly with both of us working in cahoots with each other. CHASNZ mostly the physical health and injury prevention system design, and then obviously who are Mates, and obviously being part of the whole suicide prevention charity. But really got to remind yourself at the end of the day, Mates is not just all about just talking about suicide prevention. It's actually just talking to our industries, because the industry stories that we get to actually listen to, we're trying to convey that back to our people so they feel as though there are other options of mostly the invisible tools when it comes to our mental well-being being handed. And this is and us working across NZ. Our focus, obviously, mental health and well-being for our workers and their whānau, but we work together because physical and mental health are inseparable at the end of the day. Sites across the full suicide prevention continuum, as I keep on reminding, at the end of the day, it is about promotion and prevention more than anything. This is really important because it's the strong mental health and well-being focus is not just about suicide. It's actually being 10 feet away from the cliff than actually on the cliff. And we really want to work about those industry stories that we want to share to make sure that we can actually try and provide better options for our workers. The training supports on-site training is about building awareness and breaking down the stigma. Our toolbox talks, if we're there more times than not, then we're actually reliable and actually a trustworthy person that's actually on site and they know us by face. And the trained workers become peer support workers really at the end of the day. It's just expanding that workforce and that safety net at the end of the day to make sure that our men and women in our industry feel as though there's someone to go to. But also we do have our case management. At the end of the day, without their help and making sure that the 24/7 helpline, it's making sure that there is that one-on-one support, but it's all confidential, and it's just making sure, that at the end of the day, that professional help also goes into our post-vention and also go into our critical incidents. What's the secret sauce? Well, it's our field officers really at the end of the day, and there's been one of the originals. To be really fair, I wasn't too sure what I was getting myself into, but 6 years down the track, I understand the importance of what that looks like because for a lot of our field officers, we've actually come from construction itself. We're trained in the suicide intervention, and we understand the job and what it does to our people. And really, at the end of the day, for us to be in that space is to build trust through being reliable in the industry and being that specific support. Once again, community-based, peer-led approach, but it creates a culture of openness and the support that extends beyond the workplace because it's not just the workers that are on site, it's our families that we're having to deal with day in, day out. And it's supposed to reach into systems of change because at the end of the day, it's about getting to the support that's out there.
I really like Slade as well. Like I've been to, I'm sure some of the people on the call might have been to one of your sessions, and you've got like a phrase you use about doing nothing or doing something, don't you? So at the core of it's actually about we don't always know all the answers, but we knew we needed to do something, didn't we?
100%. I think that really at the end of the day is just being acknowledged at the end of the day that sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and it's just about trying to really provide that information because when people don't know where to go, we struggle, and plus, especially for a lot of our men, it's not a strong suit putting our hand up to actually ask for help. We just really kind of like bite down on the leather, as they say, and just try and push through as hard as we can. So, at the end of the day, mostly what we have here in the 4 pitches we've got a lot of interaction with mostly our workers in itself. But he tangata, and as they say in the proverb, he tangata, it's the people, it's the people all the time. And ke tūrama te āwhiro, it's what we're trying to do is trying to ignite hope as much as possible. Well, when we look at the problems and why, why we're here, to be fair, the job in itself, I'd love to work myself until the point where I don't have to keep on doing this. But the reality of what that looks like, suicide takes more lives in New Zealand each year than road crashes, workplace incidents, drownings combined. So when you look at these figures, and yet we put a lot of money into roadside assistance, swimming, making sure we swim between the flags, there's not a lot talked about in mostly the suicide space. And when we look at a construction industry itself, one worker dies every 5 days. It says maybe a week, but it is every 5 days when we've broken it down. 31 workers take time off due to self-harm every week. So, when you look at these kind of stats, it's quite mind-blowing for a lot of people, especially when, you haven't been impacted by it. More stats when we look at it. I'm not a real big stat person. Really, not to be rude too much of what that looks like, but we do need them. But really trying to give them more solutions than what that looks like, how problematic our system. So when we look at it, 9 times more likely to lose someone in our industry than a workplace accident. Then we have our suicide rates in our rural and regional are quite very high, 40% higher than 20% higher for a woman. Then construction is one of the highest rates of suicide in the industry, and 98% of those who suicide are men. And 32% of those that we lose to the suicide industry, over a 10-year period, deemed influenced by workplace pressures. As we all know, we've just come out of winter, we've gone to work in the dark, we go home in the dark. Now the time has changed and we're going into a little bit lighter. The requirements are, this as much as I do, for everybody in our industry, somebody wants something done before Christmas. So those pressures are real when and exactly what that looks like when we have more daylight. There's a little bit more of a push. But we capture many people, who are nationally overrepresented. So really, when we look at especially our Māori population, there are a high number of incidents where a lot of our Māori are actually taking their lives. So
Hang on.
yeah, there's a lot going on, So at the end of the day, it's really just to try and see the best way to actually provide that stability across that threshold. Once again, yet suicide risk is not inevitable. Construction is one of the largest interests, is one of the most powerful places to drive change and to build a safety net that reaches across every day. And that's the importance of mostly where I've been part of this for the last 6 years, is that your stories from the industry are vitally important, because when I hear your stories, I don't even put a name to it, but I actually try and share it with our industry as much as we can, because the thing is, sometimes those little nuggets of gold that actually come out from our industry, they can actually give us better options for our people that are out on the floor. So research is key to everything to make this change. And, Lauren and the team have done a great job to actually bring this to the forefront.
Absolutely.
Is a problem that really is one of those cliches, but it does take a village to really solve these kind of problems. And I know that although there's a few icons on the bottom of the page there, that the amount of people, organisations across the sector that have supported this, it's a real common thing. From industry. I know that you've got relationships with government. That have been really supportive. You've got organisations like Site Safe doing training for you now, which is fantastic. So it's the one thing I think that it's almost a universal acceptance of the problem, and also a universal will of the industry to actually lean in to help solve it, which is amazing.
Yeah, awesome. 100%. Mates can do so much, but the collaborations we have with others and the expertise we have in each of the spaces we sit within, and the champions who bring about change, is so important. So my role at Mates, like Chris said, is the research and evidence. I have such an epic job, because I get to take what workers experience, what's going on in the industry, and feed that through to make sure what we're doing meets the needs of workers, but also sits above that and understands what are those bigger pressures going on and what can we do to bring about change. So research is one of our 4 pillars. And it makes sure that everything we do is grounded in worker voice, which is the most important piece of the puzzle for us, and makes us deeply embedded in Aotearoa, as opposed to being somewhere else, because we are a unique context with a diverse workforce. So the Wellbeing Survey, what Chris just said about collaboration, is such a huge example of that, because it's from ASB as our primary supporter. It's from different workplaces sharing that survey, different peak bodies sharing the survey, people supporting in all different ways right up to the event to release it. So it's an incredible example of across the industry, government, academia, all different portfolios. And a shout out to Steve. I'm so gutted not to be able to present with him, because he was a massive part of this research. This is real-time worker voice. So we collected our data in July to August, and we got over 3,000 workers, thanks to our field officers being out on sites and people sharing the survey. We did translate in 7 languages and made sure that it could be filled out on site or via QR code on your phone. This is the 4th iteration, so we're able to see shifts over time, and we're still early days with that, but as we add the years to this, we'll have really great longitudinal data on mental health in the industry. Really important that the analysis was done external. Obviously, we would have bias, so we can support the data collection, we can write up the report once we have those results, but the analysis is done outside of Mates, and that was pro bono by Allen and Clark, which is amazing, generous. Obviously, you have ethical approval, but a really exciting thing about this survey, it showed another avenue to support for workers. So because the survey itself, you kind of work through a process of reflection, it meant that workers could tick a box and ask for a callback if that reflection brought up things for them. And 194 workers did take up that opportunity. And I was just going to throw it to Slade, like, what did that actually look like in practice? So say you took the surveys out and someone ticked that box, then what kind of happens from there?
Well, usually what had happened is that once we got the box being ticked, we actually either sent a text or we'd call them. And if we didn't get them straight away, and sometimes, we either had to wait till 5 o'clock in the afternoon because they're just coming off their shift, but would leave a message, tell them who we are, and then they'll mostly either ring us back. And then we have that conversation. So it's really just to make sure that we fulfill our basically it is a promise really, because when they tick their box, we have to follow through and make sure that we get in contact with them straight away.
And is it always when they're in massive distress, or could it just be that there's something going on that they want to talk about? Or
Yeah, it's not all about distress really. It's just really just to talk to someone and they get an opportunity to offload really, and to offload on us. Mostly it's someone that is not being judgmental. It's one of the biggest factors really, is that they get to talk to us. They know that it's going to be a lot of privacy around it, and making sure that at the end of the day, if we do give them the options of our case management, then we give them that tool to say, hey, we do have other people that are specialised in this space. They can actually put you into the help that you need. Would you like it? And if they say yes, sweet, then we actually activate that into the next phase of mostly getting the help that they need. But sometimes, really, at the end of the day, it's just they've been heard, and they've been able to share and offload.
nice. Notes before we move on. I don't know if I'm the only person that when I met Steve, an ergonomist, I didn't know what that was either, at musculoskeletal. So just for anyone else who that's quite a large, complex word for them, it's problems affecting the body's muscles, bones, tendons, ligaments. So like back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, just to put that out there if anyone else is in that boat. I do a lot of smiling and nodding and then secret Googling. So this year in our survey, we made sure to separate out those musculoskeletal, so back pain, neck pain, etc., rather than just having one group of physical pain. And that's because it's really important we understand the layers of that, because in previous surveys, we know that physical pain is high. And that's why it could differ from year to year, but really it's about unpacking that. Also to note, there will always be limitations with any research, and that's laid out in the report, and it's all self-reported. So we're not asking for diagnosed mental health or things. This is self-reported. So we know that good health is the foundation for safe and productive work, but we also know that many in our industry live with physical and mental health problems. The survey told us from those 3,000 plus workers that 46% reported at least one disability, physical impairment, long-term health condition or mental health condition, and that's well over double the New Zealand average. When we dig into that, we see that the musculoskeletal and that physical impairment comes out at the top, so the most common for 28% of our workers, followed closely by mental health for 1 in 5 of the workers who did the survey. 16% disability and 8% long-term health condition. It's also important to note that 30% had no physical or mental health challenge, so that's also really important to see in there. I was going to chuck it back to Slade again as someone who's on the ground. Why do you think in this survey physical pain or musculoskeletal pain would be so high for our workforce?
Well, the actual being itself is that we don't see it. You can see an able-bodied person, but you can't tell whether or not that person is living with pain. It's one of the biggest issues that we have, when we're talking to we talk about mostly, seeing the changes behavior, but like a lot of them have walked up and said, I'm actually on so many prescription pills just to get through the day, and just, working with pain daily on the basis, and it can wear you down. But when you see a broken arm and things like that, you can physically see that. You know that the person's got a broken, but you can't see when someone has to work through physical pain mentally. So it's something that's very not seen or mostly talked about a lot in that space.
I think, Slade, it's a little bit like when we started talking about mental health in the workplace maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and we were talking about the stigma or the fact that a lot of it's sort of suppressed and it's things that we don't talk about, seen as a weakness. I think that the physical side of it has potentially got something similar where a lot of people just think or traditionally have thought it's part of the job. Okay, well, you're a builder, you're a plumber, you're a form worker, you're a scaffolder. Of course you've got pain, harden up, mate. It's that thing we talked about quite a bit. There's definitely kind of an attitude that you've made great sort of strides in destigmatizing the mental health conversations. I don't know if we've made the same strides in actually getting people to talk about their pain.
Yeah, and I think the big thing too, Chris, is that pain is something that we have to try and control and look after, because we have responsibilities to our families and the pay packet that we're having to do and take care of business, and I mean, that's where a lot of people are hiding the physical pain that they're having because their responsibility and their duties to their family.
Yeah, and look, you've got that pain. There's really not a lot of alternative jobs you can get away from pain either, in the construction, obviously.
That's right, 100%.
I think as well, when you talk about getting people to open up about their pain, if you think of that in the mental health sense, you have to create a culture where you can open up and it will be received and there's space for that. And I think when we talk to workers in our qualitative research, which is where you're gathering voice, so focus groups or interviews, they say things like, I need to get back to work for what Slade said, to support my family, or because I'll lose my job because actually I'm replaceable and there's not a lot of work out there, or they take a long time off and then that fear of going back to work, what will I be as good as I was, or what's this going to look like for me? So there's that piece to the puzzle as well, of course. Cool. So we also know that this isn't experienced the same for everyone. It was important in the survey that we asked a lot of demographic questions, whether it was age or ethnicity, job type, region, etc., so that we could dig down. And for example, when we look at the second most common self-reported issue, mental health, our younger workers in the industry were more affected. So 1 in 4 workers aged 15 to 24, and very similar for those aged 25 to 44, and that it was a really clear decline in terms of mental health challenges as age increased. I know, Chris, age is another one when we look at musculoskeletal. Can you dig into that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so this is construction planning data from ACC that we look at quite a bit. And obviously, just a couple of things. This is for claims, so just this isn't the rate. This is the number of claims over around about 10 years. And, a couple of things there. Obviously, there's a pattern, where most of our workers are. So, you see people's careers starting perhaps, just before they're 20. Then you see it tailing off pretty quickly, um, around by the time they're 60. We see as well is that, the younger guys probably have a lot more going on with their back and spine. And as you get older, what tends to wear out things like your shoulders. And we've all experienced back pain in our lives. That's not easy to deal with. Shoulder pain's actually a nasty one as well, because if you think about the way it disrupts, for example, very hard to fix. If you've got tendinitis in your shoulders. That's the thing which, it's like you mentioned before about, if you're motivated for that, it's really the only treatment for it as well. So you've got a lot of people out there who are, we call them wounded, and dealing with these things and negotiating these things at their career. So, so different profiles, you tend to probably a little bit harder when you're younger and rough to use, sheet back as they call it. I'm going to lie on the couch for a while. But as you're getting older, you see those big joints, shoulders, knees, hips, pop out as well.
Absolutely. Your microphone, Chris, for us is a little bit roboty. I don't know if that's everyone.
See if I can do
Sorry.
something.
We're just losing a little bit of what you're saying, that's all.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this is also you, though, having a look at how the ACC data overlaps with the MATE survey findings.
Okay, we'll just have to bear with me then. In terms of survey findings themselves, like what we actually find is a lot of similarities. So, is back, shoulder, and knees, synovial joints tend to wear out. It causes a lot of pain, and it's such injuries result from cumulative type issues. So it's very really how I lifted one thing and all of a sudden I felt pain. It builds up over time. So it's almost like sort of break comes back sometimes. Sometimes it's the last thing, but it's often a relation of long last poor rest, something about person as well. Higher country trades is a number one. So they're kind of like the do-it-alls. So they're doing all sorts of things: scaffolders, obviously shoulders, roofers, knees, concreters, transfer loads. So like physical strain, overreach, that sort of thing. Rotating fatigue. So fatigue is an issue. You mentioned before, Slade, about the December rush. We also know that it's quite common within construction and the construction trades for people doing 60 plus hours regularly, which really does give you a lot of time. So how cumulative, and look, it seems to be like quite deeply embedded in our business, in our industry.
You can't really move away from the physical and mental health. Like when we talk about things like it's cumulative, so similar for mental health as it is physical health. And when you think about early intervention and when those first tweaks or that first accident happens, if you don't get that time to rest and recover before returning to work, how it's inevitable that you'll get another injury and it's likely worse. Similar to mental health and getting in early, like Slade said about, you talk about the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, but being 10 miles from that cliff's edge with those tools and that support. So something that we asked the workers was, what do you think caused or contributed to your physical or mental health challenges? And what was really interesting was that stress and mental strain and age and wear and tear from time in the industry came out practically even for the top two contributors. That was followed by an injury outside of work. We know a lot of people in our industry are active in hunting, fishing, rugby, all sorts of different things. Being a parent, I want to say that the long hours and a lack of rest, pre-existing conditions, and then things like having to lift and work overhead and those different work design factors as well. It was interesting, and this links to what Chris just said, that instead of being specific workplace injuries people were referring to, it's that cumulative effect and those psychosocial pressures on site. And we know that if you leave that unaddressed, it has massive impacts for work. It lowers productivity, it causes more rework and churn, and retention among staff is low. And it shows the need to look at those invisible pressures. We've talked about pain and how that can be invisible, and is it safe to talk about it, and do we have the structures in place to support people? And this is really highlighting once again for both physical and mental health. It's really important that we do see and understand. And it's mirroring nationally, so our national burden of harm estimates, where we know that mental health and musculoskeletal account for nearly half of work-related health loss, second only to cancers. So it's a massive opportunity for our industry to look at both the mental and physical health aspects, or what is contributing to poor mental and physical health among our workers. This is a beautiful quote from one of our workers. "We use our bodies every day and get no rest. We need some support to help people's bodies to recover. Most of the guys who have issues are worried about their bodies giving out and not being able to provide. But because of the just crack on attitude, people get more hurt and they fall into dark pits of no self-worth. And I think the beauty in that quote is the link between the physical and mental, and why dealing with one or the other will never work. The importance of doing both pieces of that puzzle. Yeah, the priority is to treat both. Like, we know that the top two issues from our wellbeing survey are physical health challenges, mental health challenges. And then workers are telling us that what contributes to that is stress and mental strain and the wear and tear of doing the work. So it's really important that we're addressing both of those, and that we will miss the mark if we don't. And when you look at like a social model of disability, and this is going right back to my kind of education days working in that disability space, it's the environment you're within and those barriers and those limitations that cause the disability or the disabling piece to the puzzle. It's not the individual themselves. So if you can create a workspace, and this will be music to Chris's ears, but if you create a workspace that works for people and enables them to do the job with their individual bodies and realities, then you're going to have a great outcome. So it's tackling both physical and mental health head on. And I guess for Slade, with someone with 6 years of going out and talking to people about mental health and banging that drum for why it's so important in our industry, why do you think, even though the mind and body is one unit, that we separate out physical and we look at physical health and safety and forget the mental along the way?
Well, the thing is that the skill, and this is something that I've really learned from the industry itself, is that you look at your background of the work that you do, and I know damn well that you guys do this. You do these bloody toolboxes, you do structural meetings, you make sure that, you're doing the betterment for the actual organization, the people that you work with. Yet in that same skill that you have, you don't even use it yourself for your own well-being. Like taking time out, or a simple question is that I had an industry guy come to me, and he said, when I used to go home every night, I used to walk through the door and my kids used to scatter, they run away. And he had the bravery to walk up to one of the kids and said to them, why do kids run away when dad gets home? And kids can be pretty brutal and honest. And he turned around and said, well, Dad, every time you come home, you're always grumpy and angry. Now, for him, he just said, man, I've got to change what's going on here. So what he did is that when he gets into his car, he would actually play his favourite music that he loved to listen to. But instead of going straight home, he actually parked up into a kind of like a quiet place and actually do a debrief. How his day went. He did it, one good thing, one bad thing, parked that up. But when he got home, he had a tree outside his house and he shook the tree to remind himself that he's home. He was able to differentiate the two worlds, because we all know work can walk into your household and turn it inside out pretty damn quickly. So he made sure that he was always present for his partner and his kids, and did vice versa when he actually left the home. That, leaving those things there behind to make sure that they were always looked after. Now, that's what he did for himself each day, and that's something that we don't do on a regular basis. And we have many stories, mostly from the industry, very similar ones. I've been called the grumpy dad each time. Maybe funny at the time, but it wears you down over a period of time. So what he did is he actually come home and actually hug his kids. Now, you know what kids are like when you go to hug them. They're like, get off me, because it's not something that they're familiar with. But if you're consistent, your kids will be waiting for you to give you a hug. And that can be the change. And by these industry stories, we're trying to give our men better options of what they may look like. Because even some have even said, I even bring my wife before I go home and let her download and have a bit of a debrief instead of having these discussions at home. So these are all actually come from the industry. But I've got to remind you, one thing is this. Someone is about to go through it. One is going through it. And the third person has gone through it and experienced it. Now, the problem that you have with these three people, they don't talk to each other. And they're not able to share mostly the way they actually got through it. And that's one of the critical parts. We don't really connect with each other in a level, because there's a level of embarrassment, a level of, someone's going to think of me completely different, and people judge us. So, these things that we do so well for our own organizations, we don't really do and take on board for ourselves.
Yeah. And it's less likely to work if leadership don't model it, right?
Right.
So we can bring something on board and say it's for the people in the organisation, but if the people don't see the leadership modelling that behaviour and see it embedded in the organisation, it's unlikely to really shift the culture. There's just a shout out for the report, a really great section around work and home life stresses and what those are for workers at the moment and how they interplay. This looks like a Chris one.
Can you hear me any better now?
Oh, way better. Yeah.
Okay, great. I've just changed something in the background. So look, again, we see a lot of similarities, and we're really happy with that. Mates did put that musculoskeletal question in this year because we've always had a strong belief that the two things were deeply connected. And I'll probably start on the third point first, and that's the relationship between physical and mental health. And we used a word there called bidirectional. And what we mean is it kind of works both ways. In that if you are sore and you're sore for a very long time, or if you're recovering from a long-term injury, say you might spend, you're on workers' comp or ACC, for a couple of months for a back injury, or you're waiting for an MRI, you are much more likely to develop something like depression and anxiety. So we know that. Vice versa, if you have poor mental well-being, we know we basically treat that as an impairment. So the person's impaired, and we know with impairment and safety that, and particularly in safety critical positions, you're much more likely to have a workplace accident and suffer something else. So the two things go hand in hand. We've seen quite a lot of research in this, particularly in the world of sports medicine, interestingly enough. So with athletes, they really understand that connection between the physical and the mental. And you could actually sort of make that connection back to our industry as well, because, a lot of our people going out there every day, are, workplace athletes in terms of what they do. So, the other things in there, excessive workloads. We know that we've got an industry which has been going through highs and lows. We're probably coming out of a low now, hopefully. It does put a lot of pressure on people. We're always trying to get, the right people in the right position with the right skills, and it's really challenging sometimes. There are quite high demands on individuals. And we also know that, like a lot of people, there's a lot of financial pressure and low recognition for their work. So, if you think about residential builders, for example, and they're dealing with their clients sort of every day and what their clients' expectations are, at the same time, they're worried about running their business. They're worried about, the job that's coming through in 6, 9, 12 months' time, and also trying to work through every sort of day to achieve what they're trying to do. So the pressures are quite unique in the construction industry. And I think that, added to that, let's face it, it is a physical job. You mentioned before, Slade, they're out there in all weather pipes, dark, light, getting up early. A lot of builders and tradespeople get up at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning, whereas, people like me, have more gentlemanly hours, but it's just part of the industry. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are out on sites early to make morning toolbox talks, right?
Oh, 100%. And we have to. You just can't, have gentleman hours, because that's the reality of our industry, and the only way that we can trust it if we stand in the same space with them at the same hour.
Not for the research team,
No,
luckily. Cool. So we also know from our research what's already working that we can do more of. So when we had our open qualitative question where you could write an answer, over 2,000 workers were generous enough to fill that in. And for our workers, unanimously, it was time with whānau was a huge protective factor. Wairua and faith, that ability to connect in with their culture, their faith, nature. A good team and mateship. Banter came up so often, especially for your younger workers, that ability to have social time on site, but also across sites. They were keen to connect with others of a similar age. Trusted supports available when they need them. So not something that felt like when you were in crises, but just, I'm struggling financially. I'm spending all my money going out on the weekends. Like, how can I sort support this. So having someone you could call or some kind of supports along the way, as well as fair pay and reasonable hours. We also had an epic finding that when we looked at the data, it was just under half of the 3,000 people that had engaged with mates. And of that, there was a group that had high engagement. So 3 or more touch points, whether it was a callback, a site visit, a toolbox talk, a training. And that they were almost 50% less likely to self-report suicide-related behaviours if they'd had high engagement with mates, which is a really encouraging finding for us that where you have that wraparound model and that regular interaction, it appears to be having some impact. I won't go to an example. I'm mindful of time, just because we want to make sure there's questions. But in a nutshell, we know that prevention should address both sides of the puzzle. So those psychosocial hazards, but almost also that cumulative physical strain that we've talked about. I don't know if you want to touch briefly on this, Chris, but the types of things that CHASNZ offers in that space.
Yeah, so obviously Dr. Steve, who is listening but can't attend, is an expert in this area. And he works really closely with Chris Polachik, who many of you might know. I think those two guys have got probably the best insight into musculoskeletal sprains and strains in the construction industry in the world. And I'm not saying that just to put the wind up them, but their approach and their knowledge in this is outstanding. So we've got this thing called a participatory ergonomics program, and a lot of the stuff is free, and it's called Work Should Not Hurt. So you can find that on the CHASNZ website. We obviously had a lot of collaborations with mates, with the Live Well, Build Well guys, with industry around how to do this. The overall approach is basically trying to fit the work to the worker versus having the worker fit the job. So that's the byline. We've actually got something quite new as well. So you see there's a little QR code in the bottom right-hand corner. We've actually, one of the issues we've got is we've got one Dr. Steve and only one Chris. And we can't get them out on the website and working with the business. So what we've done is we've essentially digitized them. So we've turned all the knowledge in something called PainPal. So if you Google www.painpal.ai, where you want to scan that, it's a free tool, which is a digital musculoskeletal health partner for these to use. So again, this is all the knowledge from which I've heard in it and wider. It's not just another ChatGPT, it's very considered and curated information over we know it works for musculoskeletal. So kind of my feeling is that there's so many things about mental health that are hard to change, economic conditions, government, the great insight we have from this is the one thing in here we know can change, and we all have some tools, which is we can get looking after their bodies and having more pain-free, successful careers as part of it. Next one.
Beautiful. Oh, I just scanned it. That looks so incredible. We should have the link to that on our website to make sure people can access. When we look at what you could do today, it's things like building early career wellbeing, remembering that the Mates 0800 number and case management support is for anyone in the industry. So that can be accessed if you have a worker in distress, and just understanding it's part and parcel of being at your workplace that mental health is equally as important. Making connection part of safety. So how can you build that in at your regular touch points? Removing barriers to help by making sure that you have support options displayed as norm and spaces people can go if they need a kōrero. And easing pressure in high strain roles was another one that came up when workers were saying what really works for them or what would help. So manager huddles, spread the load, who's got a lot on. You also know what's going on at home, so you can kind of adjust. So just some of those really practical things you'll find throughout the report as well. Of course, we speak into systems change. So the workers themselves, no matter whether they were a scaffolder, a business owner, traffic management, health and safety, could see what's going on at a bigger level in our industry that feeds into the issues that they're feeling. Unrealistic deadlines, lowest cost tendering, volatile pipelines, boom and bust nature of the industry. And a lot of workers said even if you have the very best leaders, you're working in an environment where sometimes the odds are just stacked against you and there is nothing you can do, or that's the way it feels. So Mates has a massive role alongside CHASNZ, alongside a lot of other organisations in industry to bring about that massive systems change. The thing is, it's a big goal. You're working all the way upstream from your individual worker at that bottom level. You're trying to reach all the way up to government, change what's going on that shapes the industry. And we talk about it at work in a different way, but I'll use Play-Doh here, that if you drop Play-Doh at the top, right at that top level, you can fish it out. There's not much in the water. If you let that travel down the stream, you're going to start having that Play-Doh get throughout the water, and it's going to be really hard to get it out. And by the time you get downstream to that individual site level, it's so embedded in the site that you actually can't even see it, but it's there. And if someone was to drink that water, they would get so much Play-Doh in their system. And that's how we think about kind of mental health. So we can be at that downstream level supporting individuals, but we're reaching up. We're trying to change a site culture. We're trying to train up. We've got over 8,000 volunteers at sites around the country who can support one another in avenues to support, but we also unapologetically take worker voice to that top level. We speak into the systems, making sure construction workers are in the Suicide Prevention Action Plan, Mental Health Act, Tier 1 procurement, changing that so mental health is in it. We've got 8 meaty recs from this report. I'm mindful that we want to leave time for questions, so I think we'll end it there, even though I feel we could talk forever. But I think to finish on a high note and reflect on what Chris said, it can feel massive. It can feel really hard to know what to do. But there are some amazing things you will already be doing, and workers can point those out so easily. And it's just understanding what works well on your site, in your team, in your office, and doing more of that, and leaving workers better, or just as good as when they came in, is what Chris Alderson once said to me, which I loved. And if you can leave them better, that's great. But really encourage you to access the report. It's got some awesome information. I would say that because I wrote it, but it's also an exec summary, so there's a nice short one too. But yeah, would be really keen to do some Q&A, Chris.
Yeah, thank you for that. Right. Hey, there's a question here that was quite beginning by Diana, which is look, good on you for mentioning. I'm very sorry it happened, but she's suicide happened in their community 2 days ago. So like the workplace, we absolutely understand that. How do we the relationship in a community base? At one stage, see our workplace as communities, but if you take community in the wider sense, what's influence there? I think it's the heart of that question.
Yeah, hard to hear you. I'm sorry, Chris.
Something
about community support, maybe?
Yeah, maybe I'll put it in the chat there.
It's actually better.
Whatever you did, this sounds better.
Okay, so yes, there's a suicide happened in someone's community 2 days ago. It's not only the workplace. How do they do support for a community base?
Oh, 100%.
I think they just need to call our 800 number. We've done a lot of postventions. It's not something that we like doing, but it has to be done because we're just trying to make sure that we're getting to capture the best way possible to support our people in the industry. I've done many of them, and it's really just getting on site when the timing's right. What that looks like for the crew themselves, that they're actually having this discussion. We do go on site and have that discussion, and then just really fleshing out to say, hey, look, we're here. If you want to take us aside, we're more than happy to actually have these discussions. But our 0800 number is there. We do actually really get in behind that whole process, and by looking after the teams, we're all about responding the best way possible. And sometimes we've been on sites where some just want to cut a care just to bless the site because and bless the people just to feel as though that there has something been done. It hasn't been swept under the carpet. So that's the best way of going about it, is actually get a hold of us, and we'll put a plan together to support your site.
And if it is in the community, we can work with others in the space. So our case management team has those connections. And I think what Slade said is really important, because sometimes it can affect you 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, and it comes out of nowhere and you don't have that connection. So that's such a brilliant question, because it's making sure your community understands what those signs might look like when you aren't traveling well following an incident. So beautiful, get in touch.
Right. There's just a general comment there, which is just some backup for what Slade said about, people things they can do, some strategies after they leave work, which is really valuable. One thing I noticed as well, I live next to a bunch of tradies, some young guys that go out there every day, and their whole garage doesn't have cars in it. It's got a home gym. And they're out there in the evening after they've done a whole day. And I think there's something about the fact that a lot of the sort of younger generation, let's call them, sort of realise that um, keeping up with that physical fitness as well isn't just mentally, part of the job. It's also, hopefully doing something about, defeating some of those real nagging sort of musculoskeletal things. I mean, Slade, as an ex-sportsman, you'd have a reflection on that, wouldn't you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the one thing you got to remind yourself, muscle doesn't know an age. It just needs movement and needs to keep pushing itself in regards to a physical day's work. But sometimes the physical work will come down a little bit lower. It may even mean going for a swim or going for a walk in the bush. All these little things that we take for granted just to try and look after our own well-being. But that's why we keep on saying you systematically do so much for your job, but we just do very little for ourselves. And that's where we are. A lot of our youth understanding is that if you look after yourself off the field, then it can help when you're on the field. So those kind of sports analogies do apply no matter what that looks like. If you're not a sports player yourself, but it does. Like you're an athlete for the work that you do in the industry that we work in, because you work bloody hard. But we just got to find ways. How do we look after ourselves outside of that?
What about, just raising a question here, like when we talk about our industry, it's those that are on site, but what about those that find themselves doing massive hours in the office, find themselves really sedentary? You have busy periods where something's got to give, and often what does give is your exercise. And then, yeah, it kind of comes from both, where you're healing your body because of the intense physical experiences you have, and that other extreme where you find yourself unable to move. So just to note, our industry's diverse in terms of the jobs that people are doing.
A couple of quick fire questions. One's about the multicultural nature of our industry. So people talking about the lots of different nationalities. Are we doing anything specific to work around that?
Well, a lot of the actual information that we have has been translated into their language. And also that one of the biggest issues that we have is acknowledging them. We got a lot of people from other countries. They've come here, and I always thank them. I thank them for coming to New Zealand, giving up their time to be here. And as far as I'm concerned, you're Kiwis. Because you're doing the work out there, and you're putting us in situations by helping us. But we must. I think it's vitally important by acknowledging all the ethnic groups that are here, and what they do for our communities. But it's like, even to the simplest thing of mostly just even saying hello in their language, like the Filipinos saying "Como está." You just see their eyes light up. Just the appreciation that they're being acknowledged, and they're not here just to be slaves. They actually to be here as part of our community and building our industry.
Mm. And I think the more diversity we see in our industry, which is such a brilliant, brilliant thing, and making sure we're retaining our workers. Mates does a lot of collaboration because we can't sit in all those spaces. We know that, for example, for our Asian workers, the experience of mental health and the way it presents can be very different. And so we collaborate with Asian Family Services and navigate that space together, and make sure our case managers can speak different languages and represent different cultures. But of course, we can't possibly have everyone. So that collaboration is such a key part in what we do. but also we deliver in different languages. So if you've got a site, for example, that's largely Filipino, we do have a Filipino speaking field officer who goes out with the material, because it's not just translating the language, it's the whole concepts. It's seen very differently in different cultures. So absolutely, that is a key part of what we do.
Hey, Lauren, another quick question. Someone's just raised the connection, particularly with probably younger generations, connection with mental health and social media
Oh, yeah.
as a factor. Any
Oh,
views
man.
on that?
I mean, I'm not going to say I'm any expert on being young and experiencing social media, because I literally remembered the other night when I met my husband, we got a DVD out from the video shop that was open 24/7, and my kids couldn't understand what that was. I was in a webinar the other day with someone from Youthline speaking about youth mental health and social media, and it was so interesting. And there are debates on whether you do the ban of social media because it's better for them, or if you ban it, then those safety guards are gone and they'll find their way on. I'm not an expert in that space, so I won't pretend. I know there's both benefits and downsides in terms of connection, but it's about for the mental health support piece. If you've got an avenue like ChatGPT or whatever it is that is they're comfortable in opening up and sharing, it's how do you get the linkage to a real person? I know there are so many dangers along the way, but how could you use it for good to make sure that where youth feel comfortable to raise that, you can then get that real person connection? But I don't want to pretend I'm an expert in that space, because I'm not.
Yeah, it's a real temptation, I guess, as well. The doom scrolling.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something we all fall into that trap.
Comparisons.
Yeah.
100%, Chris. I think the thing is, if you want to find negative stuff, it's out there by the tonload.
Yeah.
I can guarantee
Mm.
that. But if you look for more positive stuff, it's also out there too. And we choose at the end of the day what that looks like and what we consume.
It's like your pain palette. It's a very clever way of utilizing AI and all that it offers and putting those boundaries around it to be an incredibly useful resource. And I know there's things like that happening with youth in terms of those AI things.
Yeah. Any resources that you can suggest for young people looking to get into the industry, just so they're prepared for what's coming? Someone's just asked a question about that.
Yeah, oh, I love that. So we are in the process of getting our rangatahi program off the ground, with the recognition that young people leaving school, whether that's early, whether it's later down the line, and coming into the industry, and our retention issue of young people in our industry is really low in those initial years. And so the whole idea of that will be to support that transition, to build those skills, to understand what they're about to head into. Right now is a harder one.
Yeah, right now, we're trying to work with, especially Unitech and MIT, trying to get in with them to be part of their process when they're doing their training of the youth coming through, because we already know the importance of holding on to our youth is about trying to make sure that because I'll put an analogy. We're only mere caretakers of the jersey, especially the industry that we have. And at some point, it's going to be passed on. And we need mostly our young rangatahi coming through to actually know who mates in construction are. And if we're embedded in it from the start to end, then we will have a lot more of our mostly rangatahi being a lot more kind of upskilled in that space and know what they're in for when they come into our industry. Because schools in our industry sometimes are a little bit more like they wrap them in cotton wool, but we've got to get inside there to actually give them the reality of what that looks like when you come into our industry.
Maybe an opportunity for socials to do some kind of video series or something. I think that's a great, in the interim before that program, what are some things we could do that would reach youth? So that's
Thanks
cool.
for everyone asked that question. Look, one last question. It's probably just more a structural question. Someone's just asked, where are your case managers based? Do they connect people to local services, GPs, etc.? Or is the care largely delivered by counsellors on your 800 number? Lauren, do you want to just explain how MATES works?
Yeah, so the helpline does short kind of sessions to hold that space and understand what that person needs, and that might be enough. That the call line, they have that korero and they have tools and off they go. But if they come into our case management, we hold that worker. You get assigned to someone and they unpack the issues that you're going through, because it can be really complex, and then navigate longer term supports or what's already available in the community that will help, whether that's financial, drugs and alcohol, mental health and counselling, family support, whatever that looks like, food packages, and that person just stays alongside you and then continues to check in. There's no time limit on it. So it's a beautiful, beautiful service in terms of getting to know you and just supporting you through to resources available.
On that great note, I think we'll end there. Look, as a couple of people have asked about the recording, it's going to be available, so everything will be available. If you check back on the CHASNZ website, and we'll share it with mates as well. Apologies, everyone, for my audio as well. So I don't know what was going on there. It's caused my mental health to decline a little bit over the last half hour. But I'll get it back, don't worry. I've got no idea what's happened. Look, I just want to thank Lauren and Slade and obviously Steve, who's listening at home, and Susan, who's our producer sitting in the background, making sure we do the right thing. And just look, we'll let you guys sign off as well, and then we'll end.
Cool. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Day.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.